Hey, what's going on, DDO players? Axel here. So today we're going to talk about DDO's population. So several months ago, I made a video where I broke down the DDO's population numbers of what we had at the time and made an estimate of DDO's population. But lately, we've got some really cool new information from DDOOracle.com. We actually got some new population reports based on logins, so we can draw some much better conclusions and we can see some really interesting things from the population data, especially what's been going on with the hardcore server. So let's go ahead and just dive into the data here. So here on the screen is, you can see one of the population reports from DDOOracle.com. There's several others that you can look at as well if you go to their website. But the first conclusion we can kind of draw here is that there are some cool trends with the hardcore servers. So on this graph, we have a number of logins per day, which is what this is showing, and each of the lines represents each of the various servers, 8 regular servers and then 9 with hardcore. So the first cool thing immediately that I saw was that, as you can see here, the hardcore server started off at about 6,700 logins or so in its first day. The big spike here at the beginning of the graph is where the hardcore server came about. It didn't exist before that. So one thing that a lot of players have been kind of complaining about and kind of predicting is that the hardcore server would take away a lot of population from the other servers, and what this data is showing is that that wasn't really the case. As you can see on the graph, the other populations stayed about the same throughout hardcore server's life. So even though we saw a big spike with the hardcore server and we saw it reduce in population as it got closer and closer to its end date, which makes sense, the other populations stayed about the same. And we did see the trend with the hardcore server that everyone thought we would see, is that the population was really big at the beginning and then it slowly trailed off, which makes sense because as players get closer to the end of the 90 days, they're going to be less willing to roll up a new character on a server that has a defined set of time before it ends. That hardcore event ends, so that makes sense. Also, players would have probably gotten burnt out as well and just kind of played a lot at the beginning and then stopped maybe halfway through. So we did see a trend where hardcore server did decline. One thing that surprised me a little bit here was just how popular hardcore server was compared to the other servers. So as you can see, starting out on the graph, hardcore server was getting about double the population of the other servers and then kind of trended downward from there. But that's really surprising to me that it was that popular, considering it's a VIP only server. So that lends me to believe that VIP, there are a lot more VIPs in the game than I thought. It also shows me that a lot of players from the other servers' population staying about the same. That lends me to believe that either one, the hardcore server brought back a lot of returning players and a lot of new players because of that new feature. Either that happened, or two, the existing player base was just playing more because of hardcore servers. So either it brought a lot of new players in, or players would still play their regular time on their normal server, and but then play hardcore in addition. So one of those two things seems to have happened. Next thing is, my original prediction from my last video on population seemed to be pretty accurate from what I'm seeing here. We can actually go further and calculate and estimate population, current active players, from this data. So what we'll do here is we'll just take a rough estimate. So as you can see on the graph with the regular server populations, they peak at about 5,000 logins per day, and in their lowest days they're somewhere around 3,500. So we'll take about the middle of that and say that the average login is about logins per day is about 4,200. And we'll also say that Caneth here being the most populated because it's the default login, and Wayfinder, we'll say those are about a wash. So as well as hardcore, since it was since it peaked and then declined, as you'd expect. So we'll kind of just say 4,200 is about an eyeball estimate on this graph for average logins per day. So if we start that as a basis, I'm going to throw a little bit of numbers on you on the screen. So you take 4,200 logins per day times 7 days, you get 29,400, and you also have to times that by 9 because there's 9 servers. So that brings you to 264,600. Then you have to divide that by 7 because I'm going to assume, just like I did in my last population videos, that the average active player is going to log in about 7 times per week in total. So that is an estimate. You could change these numbers a little bit if you think that number is lower or higher. It just depends on how you define active player. So that's how I define it. I think that's a pretty good estimate considering that includes everything. That includes disconnects. That includes if you log in twice in the same day. I think that's a fair estimate for an active player. So once you do that and divide that number by 7, you're going to get a total estimate of 37,800 active players in DDO over the past 90 days. So I think that's about an accurate estimate as I can get from these numbers. Again, if you assume that the average number of logins is lower or higher per day per week, you're going to get less players, more or less players in that estimate. But I think saying that the population is between 35,000 and 40,000 players is about accurate. So that's where I think the population is right now. So some other things we have to say about this data, a couple things. It's not perfect. This data only shows logins only. So if a player logs in for 5 minutes or logs in and stays playing for 5 hours, those are kind of the same. So that's not the perfect scenario, especially considering in the hardcore server, I think a lot of people, even if they weren't playing on the hardcore server, a lot of VIPs were just logging in the hardcore server just to make a character to get their gold rolls that they're going to be able to transfer over to the regular servers after the 90 days hardcore server ends. So even if they weren't playing a lot on the hardcore server, they still would have been counted as logged in. So maybe it's not perfect, those numbers, and just logins just per day isn't going to be a perfect statistic, but it's something. Another thing is that the DDO Oracle numbers could be wrong. I don't know of any way to verify them. We really can't verify them. The developers haven't ever commented, as far as I know, on these numbers. So we have no way of checking them. So we don't know. I mean, I tried to ask DDO Oracle like how they got their numbers, and the person who run it, I asked them on Twitter, and the person who's running it didn't seem to want to really say. So I don't know where they come from. I don't know how to check them, so they could be wrong. There could be some error in the way he's drawing the data out, he or she. But I will say that I have no reason to think that the data is wrong. We see trends on the data that we would expect, such as the hardcore server starting high and then going low. We see dips and valleys in the data as we would expect for the various days of the week. Obviously, the population, as you can see here, kind of goes in hills on the lines here because people are going to play more on the weekend days than they do on like Tuesdays, say, or Wednesdays. So there's a lot of trends that are right in the graphs that lends me to think that the numbers are probably right. But again, there's just no way to know for sure without the website like thoroughly explaining how they get the data, or really to check that. So yeah, guys, that's going to be about it for this video. So some cool new data points. It does show me overall that DDO's population is doing well. It seems to be very consistent. If you compare it to the data from DDO Oracle from years and years ago, or if you just look at my prior video, you can see that the population has stayed really consistent. So that this data does tell us that DDO's population, DDO is keeping its players. It is keeping its hardcore players. There's definitely a base of players that have stuck with this game for a long time and probably will continue to stick with it as long as Standing Stone continues to do a good job, I would say. But there seems to be a lot of players sticking around in the game for the long haul. DDO seems to have its niche. It seems to be doing fine population-wise. It's not a huge MMO like World of Warcraft or something. It's a small niche MMO, but it does seem to have its niche of players, and SSG seems to be doing well with new expansions and regular updates still coming to this game. So it seems like it's doing well. It seems like it's doing just fine. So guys, that's all I have for this video. Let me know if you have any comments or anything else. Feel free to go to DDOOracle.com if you want to check these numbers for yourself. That is going to be it for this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Have a good one and take care.